Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Michelle Graff, and I'm the editor-in-chief at National Jeweler. I'm pleased to welcome you to the latest episode of My Next Question, National Jeweler's webinar series sponsored by RDI Diamonds. Today's session is hosted by our senior editor, Brecken Branstrator, and features three guests: Norbert Massey, Senior Program Manager at PAC Tanzania; Monica Stevenson, founder of Moyo Gems and iDazzle; and Christina Maria Villejas, Director of Mines to Market at PACT. Before I turn it over to Brecken and her guests to get started, I just want to let our attendees know that if they have a question, they can type it into the Zoom Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. I will be back on at the end of the discussion to facilitate the Q&A, and we'll get to as many questions as I can. Also, today's session is being recorded and will be available on the National Jeweler website this coming Friday, April 23rd. Now I'll turn it over to Brecken to get things started. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for that introduction. And let me just start off by saying a huge thank you to my guests for being here today to talk about this amazing project. We're joining from all over the US, and then we also have Norbert joining us from Dar es Salaam. So thank you so much, guys. We are here today to talk about the first 2 years of Moyo Gems, which is, of course, a collaboration with women miners in Tanzania to help get their gems to market. And we're going to get into more of what that means, of course, later. But I also know that that took, of course, a lot of groundwork to get there. So let's start there. Christina, you and I met for the first time, I believe, at the Chicago Responsible Jewelry Conference a few years ago. And I know that you mentioned you also met Monica and, of course, the other partner involved, who is Stuart Poole of 1948 in Chicago as well. And that's where sort of things kicked off. So let's start by going back to that and talking a little bit about how it was that you all connected and decided that you wanted to do something like this. So I'm going to start by throwing this to Christina first.
Yeah, sure. So thank you for having us. Accidentally hit mute there. Yeah, our story begins in actually San Diego, where the GIA, the Gemological Institute of America, had been collecting samples of different gem discoveries all over the world, and they had quickly realized that through their field teams, they realized that the people who were mining the gems knew the least about them, and so they approached PACT with this idea: hey, what do you think of teaching artisanal miners about the gemstones that they mine? And they quickly came to me just through a series of introductions. And we decided to choose Tanzania. And they asked me for some parameters about where are most artisanal miners legal, like legally mining, where are there not a lot of problems with child labor or conflict. And we actually contacted a woman named Salma Kundi, and Norbert and I, who I just met, we had just been introduced, met Salma, and she suggested Tanga, a place in northern Tanzania that's known for the Umba Valley, these beautiful gemstones. And so we chose Tanga, and we rolled out this program with GIA, and we started with women miners, because why not? First of all, why not start with women? I'm a feminist, so
Here.
Yes, but also because women are 1/3 of all artisanal and small-scale miners around the world. 1/3 of 40 million people that use shovels and picks and human strength to dig minerals out of the ground. Yet we never hear about them, and I was really tired of that. And so GIA said, if there's a need, let's do it. I said, fabulous. So Norbert and I scoped this area, and I knew this area was special. And I met all these amazing women and learned about how they mine. And we wrote this program, and the program ended up transforming their lives, increasing their incomes between 3 and 5 times what they were before. And that's just by some simple education designed by GIA. But people kept asking about these ladies because they're ever so lovely, ever so fierce, and had beautiful gemstones to sell. And at the same time, a guy named Marvin Wambua was in an SUV with Monica Stevenson. And he was turning to Monica and he said, there's this project, Christina's involved. All these ladies need is someone to buy these gems. And Monica was like, And at the same time, I kept hearing this question from a jewelry sector, people saying, Christina, how can we buy these gems? And I kept thinking, but I know nothing about marketing. But then I met Monica and Stuart in Chicago. Monica and I just like met on the side, and then Stuart walked up and said, whatever you're talking about, I want to be involved. So he jokes that he gate crashed, but really we would have come to him eventually. So that's kind of how we all got together. And the next step was going to Tanzania, meeting with the miners, and actually asking them what they thought. Is this a good idea? Do you want this? If no, you still get lunch. Don't worry. But if you do, let's talk about it. And we spent 2 days talking about that. And so we designed the program with the women, which is very unique amongst really any program. And Monica, anything to add?
Yeah, I think you connected all the dots. It's really funny. I'm sort of amazed that it's been 2 years, but at the same time, it's just been lightning speed as well. It feels like it's been 2 years. We've done a lot, actually, starting with that, connecting, and then that conversation with the women, and having that dialogue in their village, in their school, actually in Yombeni, was like a very pivotal point for us to design something that actually listens to them and works for them, versus having some idea of this is how we're going to come in and do things and save you. We built it with their input. So I thought that was a really important part. And just, I was very intrigued with the whole GIA program. And then Marvin saying, Monica, you would not believe like what is happening with the women. They're so energized, and they're so, because the GIA had gone back in and done a follow-up, and really that to me was like, like a buzzer went off in my head. I'm like, this is exact. There's beautiful gemstones that comes from this region. And I had been to that region maybe 2 or 3 times at that point. And so I had seen some of these women, the villages, like I had purchased some of the gemstones. So the idea that we could actually build something very deliberate and around their needs was really what sort of motivated me to kind of get involved, and also to, I don't know, just kind of see where this journey would take us. So,
and to come full circle, Salma, who helped us find the location, and Norbert, our man on the ground, who you'll hear from in a moment, they both came to Chicago. They followed, which was really a cool experience. I've heard from a lot of jewelers that they had never met a miner before. And it was Norbert's first time in Chicago. And I've since learned, always have a good jacket available for Norbert and Salma.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a pretty exceptional Chicago conference, having those voices there. I think that might have been my first one as well, and it was just really cool to hear about. So going back to these women in Tonga, I mean, obviously we were talking about the GIA's program that was established there, but they were also, they have that organization, right, Tuoma. So what was it about them, just to dive into that part, that also made them sort of an ideal spot to get a project like this going? I don't, Christine or Monica, either you want to tackle that?
Yeah, sure. Maybe I can talk about what made them interesting, and then we can come in and talk about how they've changed since the project began. So I met Tuoma about 8 years ago in Tanzania, and it was at this session, this advocacy event where the miners interact with government and provide input on new laws. And PAC had just done some research, and we wanted to get the input of the miners. Did we get it right? Where are the gaps? What did we get wrong? And I had a side session with Tuoma because I really wanted to understand how, as a woman, how I can serve women miners better, because they're underserved by almost every organization there is. And they looked at me and they said, and they ever so gently schooled me on gender, just talking about like why my program was poorly designed for women. And I was so struck by it and their passion and their directness. And that's been part of the pleasure of working with them is their connection is poor. That's why they're not here with us today. It's always a connection. But they tell us the truth and they tell us what's going right and what's going wrong and what we need to improve on. And when we're screwing up, they tell us. And I always get huge hugs, but I really, I was drawn to them because of that, because of the passion. And it's really been a pleasure. Norbert, what have you noticed over the years?
Christina, can you come back again? Sorry.
Oh, how have you noticed Tuwoma shifting from when you first met them to how they are now?
Yeah, sure. So I've been working really very closely with Taoma since we began Moyo. And of course, when we started working with them, of course, by then, they were really not very sure if this project is going to happen. They kept on asking questions whether is this really true or is it just one time and then it won't come again? So there were really lots of questions. And until they saw that the second market came again after it was planned that we're doing it on quarterly basis, and then the second market came, and then the third one. So they were really confident and even started to plan for some things ahead. Like right now, they're even at a place where now they are, increasing the value for the stones. From starting the market, now they've started even adding up the value for the stones. So they've built their confidence over time and they're really happy for what is happening with this market.
It's fantastic. Thank you, guys. Let's take a closer look also at what exactly Moyo Gems includes. So, there's a lot of different components there. It's a pretty interesting project. So, Christine, I'm going to throw this to you first and just dig a little bit through from, mine to market, what it involves.
Sure. We call Moyo Gems a responsible sourcing initiative. Now, when you do that, you have to have rules. You can't just buy from miners and call it responsible. You have to work on empowerment or provide services, or you can be creative, but you can't just buy, or else you're just a buying initiative. What we've done is establish traceability down to the miner and the broker themselves. We believe in radical transparency. There's 4 components of Moyo. There's 4 rules to be a miner. You have to be a member of a pre-selected village. There's 6 villages that are currently part of Moyo. You have to be an alumni of a GIA training. So we've provided several rounds of training. So everyone who wants to be part of it can be a part of it. We provide health and safety training as well. So they all learn the value of masks and how to really appreciate that when you get injured, it's not just that injury that day. It's the time you can't work. It's the hospital visit. All these things add up. The third rule is be a member of Tuwoma. And men can be members too. They just can't vote and they can't run for leadership. In that way, the women stay in charge. And it's up to Tuwoma who the members are, but it costs $7 a year to be a member of Tuwoma. And then the 4th rule is the hardest, but we provide support. The 4th rule is you have to prove that you are working on a licensed mine. So we have a couple of ways you can do that. We can be on a group license, which costs the same as an individual license, or they can be on individual license, or we've created this template agreement whereby people can get the permission of the license holder. So Brecken, if you're in charge, PACT approaches you and says, I, Brecken, allow Monica and Christina to operate my concession. My license number is X, it expires this date. And then that's a piece of paper that documents that relationship. And then PACT takes that to the Ministry of Mines to make sure that you actually have a license and when no one expires. So the point being that all these miners are pre-vetted. We know who they are. We have a history of their production. And then over time, we're rolling out new programs. So in 2021 and 2022, we're rolling out economic savings groups to these areas. And that's in response to COVID, to really help build back better and build with some intentionality, resilience in livelihoods and diversification, and really thinking about how they can use the money for today to plan for tomorrow, to really help achieve their dreams. So we have a video later, which you'll see some of the short-term impacts of the program, but what we're also learning, kind of leaning in for, are these longer-term impacts.
Right, which must include also, can you tell us a little bit about the market days and what those included and how you sort of launched that part of the initiative?
Yeah, sure. Maybe Monica, you want to take that on?
Sure. So again, we in 2018, we took our sort of scouting venture to really build, really understand the women's challenges, and not assume, but actually hear from them what their challenges are, what they would like to see from the market. And that's kind of how we informed our market days. So the very first market day was in May 2019. So we are actually coming up on 2 years. And we built it with some structure so that we had to do it in where the government is one of our stakeholders as well. Just so you know, like we have to include the Tanzanian government in our process and our discussions, because ultimately we have to export these. We have to pay royalties and taxes on what we buy, and we also have to export those. So we do have to actually include them in discussions. We can't just go under the radar and try to buy. Like we have to involve them. And so between PACT and Tuwoma, they provide kind of the structure and what I call the scaffolding for it, right? So Tuwoma is familiar with all of the miners, and they know where their claims are. And again, they went through a whole process of the registration and checking those registrations against the regional mining office. So that had to be completed before our first market day. We're set up at tables, and we are in the government building where they kind of said, this is where you're having the market. And we have PACT in the room, we have Tuwoma in the room, and we have a local broker. By Tanzanian law, I cannot come in as an international dealer and deal directly with the miner. That is probably a situation that could result in, if I don't have good intentions, not very good results for the miner, right? So by Tanzanian law, we have a local broker in the room representing the woman or the artisanal miner who is participating in Moyo. And then I have an export broker as well. So, but I'm sitting directly across from Hadija or from, any number of our miners that we had started to get to know by name, but also now we have like 400 miners registered with the program. So I can't know every single person, but I recognize, quite a few, because we've had a lot of people come back to every single market day. But I get to sit across from them, and so I look at their gems. The broker has helped them kind of pre-sort, pre-select, so that we can be as efficient as possible. They have a number, they have a miner number that they're assigned by Tuwoma, and then they have an order in which they're seen during the day. And these market days usually go for three days or so, and we see as many miners as we can in a day. And it can be, some have one small little baggie and some have several, because some of their claims, this is a very interesting geologic area where they might have several different gems that are actually mined on one claim. So, so we look through the gems, I make an offer, and many times the woman, especially if this is her first time at a market day, she'll say, Sawa, like, okay. I'm like, no, you're supposed to negotiate. Like you're supposed to, you know, like that's just the first number. Like you're supposed to come back. And sometimes the broker will help her a little bit too. So, ultimately, we settle on a price that we feel both parties are happy with and satisfied with. And then we either pay them mobile money. Some women prefer to receive that, but that is a small portion of the proceeds. Most of the time it's going to be in T shillings. And so I hand over the money directly to the woman. The woman takes her money and pays the broker his 5%, which they negotiate before they get there. So for the first time, instead of this woman sort of finding gems and then going to the local broker that day and saying, I need this, you know, I would like to I'd like to sell this to feed my family or whatever it is that her needs are, she would normally get a fraction of what that final export price is on that gem, because it will change hands 7 times, 10 times before it leaves Tanzania. And at every point, a broker, who's usually a man, not always, but usually, is making money on that transaction. And the woman who dug it out of the ground, who actually worked so hard to retrieve that gem, gets a very small portion of the price. In this case, they get 95% of that export price, which in exit interviews, we do a lot of data collecting during these market days as well through PACT and Tuoma. And most of the women report getting 3 to 10 times from market what they would normally get from their local broker.
Wow.
This is pretty impactful. So that's kind of what a typical market will look like. It's multi-day. It requires a lot of setup. It's not just sitting at a card table and buying gems, which is kind of a little bit more of the way things usually work there. But that structure, having all of that Tuoma background and record keeping, having all of the packed double checking of those records is what enables me to be able to hold up a gem and say, this was mined by Salma. This was mined, you know, in this village. So to have that level of traceability requires that level of you know, organization, but it's ultimately worth it because I think the storytelling and the traceability is really, really impactful.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said you guys are already up to 400 miners, part of Moyo. That's crazy.
I bought thousands of gems. Like we've purchased thousands of gems at this point. So
wow, that's amazing. Lot has happened in 2 years. You guys have really done such a beautiful job. Norbert, I want to throw a question at you though. You know, as this has been developing, what have been some of the biggest challenges that you guys have sort of had to cross as you've been developing the project?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, so from when we started the program, we had some issues in terms of the quality of stones that miners were bringing to the market. You know, they've learned through GIA what kind of stones they're supposed to sell in terms of quality, in terms of color, in terms of clarity. But still, even when we started the market, miners thought that maybe this is a place where they can bring everything from the low value stones to everything to the market. So it was tough for the buyers and to know, I mean, to kind of sort all the stones that are brought into the market. So from the market day one, it was really taking a lot of time for the miner. When one miner gets into the room, probably, I mean, he or she will take more than an hour before she gets out. So that's when we came out with a solution of doing pre-sorting before they get into the market. So sorting was really one of the challenges when we started, but over time that has been reduced. But also when we're starting also, we're doing market in one place, which was called Mkinga. So all the miners will travel to one place, one location. So it was taking a lot of time for them to be in that one place. For example, you know, in the villages, we will always have one vehicle going to that direction. So everyone will leave like early in the morning, like 4 a.m., and then start selling, and probably they'll go back at around 6 p.m. in the evening. So that was a lot of challenge. So that is how we came up again with having another location where it's close to the miners. So we started doing another market in villages, a village called Kalalani, that is close to the miners who are in that place. So at least now that challenge is no longer there. And another challenge was really when we were starting market, we had to pay fare, like a transport cost for the miners, because they didn't understand whether these markets would work compared to, they're used to local brokers. So it was difficult for them to come to the market. So the program had to start paying them the fare for them to attend the markets. So after understanding that they are able to sell, they can come to the market and be able to sell. So they know when we ask them, is it important to give fare anymore for them to come to market? They say no. Now we can go to the market, we are sure we can sell, and they go back home happy. So we are no longer paying them any fee or any transport costs.
Right.
But also, for us to conduct a market, sometimes, we need to provide information ahead of time, like a month prior to the market. And this needs a lot of traveling to the villages, also telling them of what quality of stones are required. So that is still happening, but of course, we have found a way that we have created some contact persons in each village where you can call. So even the mode of, going to them every now and then, that one has reduced. So those are really some challenges that we are facing as we are growing up the project.
Right. So to go back to that last point, you now have contacts in sort of each village that's involved that you can go to on a regular basis and communicate these kinds of things. Okay. And how many different, sorry, Christina, did you want to add something?
Oh, yeah, it's just we are committed to bringing down the cost of running each market day. And so that eliminated one trip that we had to do. And also, we're also just decentralizing more and more and raising our partners higher and higher. So Tuoma often will do the trips on our behalf because they're closer, and why not them?
Right.
Our local partners. Yeah, we do these exit interviews to find out, how the miners feel about how they were treated, and any suggestions we can, customer service suggestions we can do in the future. But then also Norbert leads a team that just do phenomenal work. And you often see him with me at international events because he's really our man on the ground. And I just want to thank him.
Yeah. Amazing. On that note, I did want to share, you guys shared a video with us that the GIA helped you make about this project. So I'm really quickly going to share my screen so that we can watch that and people can get a better idea also of. Can you guys hear that okay?
Rewind.
Our community has changed. By using the GIA Mineral Guidebook and applying what GIA has taught us, our community has changed for the better since GIA's visit in 2016. Before the GIA Mineral Guidebook and GIA training, we sold our gemstones for next to nothing. But now we understand how to classify and sort our gemstones and bargain for better prices. There has been a change, because before, when a gemstone was worth 20,000 T shillings, we would sell the same stone for 2,000 T shillings. And before, some of our community lived in shacks. Now they've moved into proper houses. And before, sometimes we'd go without food, but now we don't miss meals because we make more money selling our gemstones. So our quality of life has improved.
Yani tunachimba pamoja
There were originally 2 groups of women in our community, and then they formed one group first, and then another group formed from that one. And now these 2 groups of women are mining together, and that initial group farms chickens. They sometimes sell the chickens and buy diesel gasoline or equipment that will help them mine. Or they sell the chickens to buy food. It's not all the time that they sell gemstones. So the Chicken Co-op project helps them sustain themselves when they aren't selling gemstones. Moyo Gems is a blessing to us. Moyo has given us the exposure to sell our gemstones at a fair price, and the international market is right there. Before, we would get our gemstones and run to people out there who didn't give us a fair price. But now we're getting a fair price. Moyo is helping a lot, and we are making new friends who are buying our gemstones. Not all of the brokers are happy, but the ones who get it, they are happy because they are joining our group and they're meeting the buyers. But those who don't get it are not happy with the way the current situation is. Because before, they would buy a gemstone from us for 20,000 T shillings, and then they would in turn sell it for 300,000 T shillings. So obviously they're not happy because we, the women mine owners, are more aware of pricing our gemstones, and we know how to sort them, and we know the value of our gemstones. I have 3 places where I'm mining, and I own the 3 concessions. The one I'm currently mining is green tourmaline. In that same area, I'm mining savarite, and if you remember the first place GIA visited, I have commercial garnet and sapphire there. I also have another place that I own which is exclusively savarite, but I don't have the equipment and the money to start mining there. But in the future, I would like to make money from the other 2 mines to help me start mining on my exclusive savarite mine.
That was amazing. I love her note of not all the dealers are happy, but those who are get it. That was great. So sort of following up on that, Monica, I'm going to throw this to you as one of the 2 gemstone dealers who are selling this. What kind of feedback are you getting, and who is flocking to these gems? What kind of buyers do you have?
Yeah, so we bought our first round of gems in May of 2019, and then I have all of the Anza gems on my side. Stuart Poole, who's actually in the audience, so feel free to ask Stuart a question as well. But my gems are cut in the US by Beth Steer, so there is a continuation of from the Moyo miners to a woman faceter who's really, really talented, really wonderful. So it took a little while to kind of cut those gems and then actually get those gems to market, probably late 2019. And then really 2020 hit. We went to Tucson and we were so excited and we have all these plans, right? And I was like, oh wow, this is going to be a really interesting year to see how we do with Moyo. And what I found was that people were listening. People really connect to this story. I would say that the people who are mostly buying our gems are independent artisanal designers and women who care really, really deeply where their materials come from. And this might be their first experience with even kind of delving into the idea of responsible sourcing, but they hear this story and they're like, wow, this is sort of, it's a no apology gemstone, right? We know exactly who it comes from, where it comes from. It has a very, very small supply chain. That the miners are benefiting in a way that's probably disproportionate to how they normally benefit. So and to be able to tell the story to their ultimate customer, whether that's a retailer or a consumer, to be able to say, Hadija, mind this, you know, and Beth Steer cut it. Or in Stuart's case, all of his gems are cut in-house by their cutters in Sri Lanka. So like there's a very, very tight, very specific chain of command there. And so it's easy storytelling, but it's also really resonates with people who just care. I think that people who really want to understand where their materials come from, there's been an increased awareness, I really feel like, in the last year of where, you know, Black and Brown communities are the source for most of our materials in this industry. And have we really recognized those communities? Have we supported them? Have we given them fair wages? Have we supported them in joining the global gem trade? And I really feel like that's been, you know, people who want to connect with that are the ones most interested in our finished gems. I would like to add too, the story is great and all, but if we didn't have pretty gems, like designers, I mean, that would only go so far. If what we were trying to sell is opaque or awful, or we can't buy all the material that the women bring to us, and that actually really breaks my heart. But we also have to recognize, if we want this to be sustainable, if we want this to be a business, it actually has to be, they have to be beautiful, and they have to there has to be a commercial appeal and a commercial sustainability to that as well.
Right. No, that makes sense. It has to make it to the consumer to be able to keep telling the story, right? So that you can grow it and go from there. That makes sense. And on that note, where do you guys see, where would you like this to go? Where do you want growth from here? And where does the future of the project lie? Throw that to anyone who wants it.
Yeah, sure. I can take that one, and then maybe Norbert can talk about what we're doing starting tomorrow. So he's heading to the field to take some metrics so we can tell the story even in richer terms. So yeah, so as Monica talked about, we're not buying all the gems yet, but we're working on it. The idea is that you know, lots of different things come out of a mine. You have like these, you know, high-end gemstones, but you also have like the mid-tier and the lower grade. But there are healing crystal markets that love tourmaline and love amethyst. There are, you know, producers, maybe some on this call, who sell like on Etsy or other kind of, you know, more accessible sites, and that, you know, have different price point needs. And so we're exploring that very carefully, starting very small, and then once we prove the concept and get it right, then we'll expand. So I see people are writing in the comment. If you want to get in touch, just follow us on Instagram and let us know you want to be involved. So you know, I'll lay out some numbers. We buy about 10% of what the ladies mine. 10%. And so I can really, you know, we're changing lives already, right? You heard it from Hadija. But I can really change lives if we get this other part right, and start buying all their stones instead of just a few. And so there's huge potential if you think about that. And I thought we had to expand very quickly. We started off in 4 villages, and now we're at 6. We started off at 50, I think 2 miners, and then 200, now 400. And what happened is that some people have shifted from mixed livelihoods, so like petty trading and farming and various things, to mining more. Now that has some downfalls potentially, especially in the time of COVID, when we realized that you know, global supply chains can stop very quickly. But the point being is that we didn't have to expand really quickly. We actually just could stay in our little area and grow slowly, and grow the number of miners that were part of the program. But always keeping an eye on, are we causing any unintentional harm by, you know, having people focus on one livelihood? And that's part of the reason for the savings groups, is helping them think through, okay, if I need a new roof for my hut, Can I start buying slowly, and eventually have a new tin roof instead of a leaf roof, for example. Lots of potential for growth, but with our eye on what's actually going to change.
Right.
Any volunteers to buy the mid-tier stuff in bulk, let me know.
There you go. And I think that's a great sort of point to end on. Is one of my last questions was going to be, and I want to jump it back to Norbert to talk about whatever it was he wanted him to talk about. But from the start, you mentioned, you were always we want to make sure that this is a feasible project and that it's scalable, so that we're not just addressing this one group of miners, so that we can take it. And clearly you found a way now that you've expanded to so many miners. So it's exciting to hear sort of where you could take it from here. And Norbert, did you want to tell us about something that was starting tomorrow that Christina hinted at?
I might be putting him on the spot, but you're on mute. But we're sending him out, and you're on mute, Norbert.
Yeah. So of course, one thing that we are really planning is try to work on the value addition for the low value stones among the women. So they've been asking if they can make things like beads or try to work on the low value stones. So that's one thing that we have a market even in the country where they can sell those beads and other small things that come out from these low value stones. So we're working with them. Of course, we're planning that they can learn from a college in Arusha, and then work with other people who can support them with a tumbler machine and the ones that can make these beads. So that's one area that we are really want to work with the women, so that they can gain more value from the stones, low value stones. But also right now we're also doing assessment of these women in order to build the capacity of Tawama. We have been working with them, so we want to build more their capacity so that they can be more sustainable in terms of implementing the programs, in terms of they want to be dealers also. They want to do the export, So we want to make them grow in this area so that they can get more value and support their miners. So those are the few things that we'll be working with this year.
Yeah, we just got a grant from the Tiffany and Company Foundation, and it's really exciting because it's to respond to COVID in medium and long-term ways. And in the medium term, it's this economic strengthening. It's this resilience building that I mentioned. In the long term, it's building leadership organizations and building them to be their best. Tawoma is a wonderful organization, and we want to strengthen them so they'll be around in the long term, and they can continue to do great things. So Norbert's again our man on the ground, making all that happen. If it weren't for him, we would be lost. But Brecken, one thing that you mentioned was are there growth opportunities? And I just wanted to remind everyone, artisanal and small scale mining, about 90% of all mine labor in the world, 90% all mine labor in the world is ASM, artisanal and small scale mining, people using shovels and picks. Yet they're completely invisible. And the colored gem sector, 70 to 90% comes from this population. And yet there's only a couple of initiatives active, buying from them, helping raise the standard of mining, working on local leadership and having them in charge, and transforming the supply chain. So a lot of work to do. We love working with others and inspiring other movements. And if people want to, wherever they're sitting, watching this webinar, they can act by buying the stones. We're not going to be successful unless you buy. And then if you want to start your own, we can't be everywhere, but we can help. So just get in touch with me. I have a feeling I might regret that by having so many people overwhelm me, but it's a sisterhood, and that's how we see it.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you guys so much. I'm going to throw it over to Michelle really quickly. We have had a lot of conversation in the chat, it looks like, so I want to see what kind of feedback and questions they have for you guys.
Okay, thanks everyone. That was a great discussion. That was so interesting. And we have had tons of compliments and questions coming in. So I'm going to get to as many of those as possible. I also want to give another thanks to our sponsor, RDI Diamonds. As a reminder, you can still type questions into the Zoom Q&A box. And as I said, I'll try to get to as many as possible. While we give people a couple more minutes to ask questions, I'm just going to say a quick word about RDI Diamonds. RDI Diamonds, the selection you want, the quality you need. Thousands of diamonds, that's just the beginning. RDI offers a wide range of services and support to help you succeed, from flexible memo options, a partnership with the Beers Group Industry Services, to generous stock options and cost-efficient shipping. RDI's goal is to provide the highest quality of both care and diamonds to your store. Visit rdidiamonds.com today to learn more. rdidiamonds.com. Now let's get started with our listener questions. A lot of questions people want to know. We've had a couple questions coming in. People want to know how they can help, how they can get involved. I went ahead and put the Moyo Gems handle for Instagram at Moyo Gems in the chat. Monica, Christina, I don't know if you have any, Norbert, I don't know if anyone has any other ways they want to be contacted.
I run the Moyo website, so you can donate actually on it. For us to deliver more programs to help the ladies, we need donations. And PACT is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Been around for 50 years in excellent standing with all the right folks. So if you want to make a contribution, that's one way. You can buy the stuff. You can buy the gems from Monica or Stuart. Monica is onzagems.com and Stuart is 1948.com. Hopefully he can put it in the chat. We also have a new trader. His name's Emmanuel Piot and of Masan Piot. And so we're slowly growing the folks that are trading Moyo Gems. Those are I think the biggest ways that you can help right now. Monica, any other ideas?
I think you covered it pretty well. The market days, again, because we're not just setting up a card table and buying the gems, does entail a lot of sort of programmatic sort of support of the miners and the communities. And so the donations are helpful in terms of that knowledge base and the scaffolding and the additional education that we kind of try to provide the miners. So we're not just buying their gems, but we're actually sort of empowering them to participate a little bit more fully. And of course, buying gems is great. We've had a couple of people in the chat say that they would love to explore maybe the crystal or the lower, sort of like maybe lower value market. So that's also helpful because as much as we would love to grow the program and kind of treat it as a pilot that could be rolled out to other places, there's still a lot of opportunity just in this region alone. So I think that's important to kind of explore. So I think you covered pretty well. So Stuart, I hope Stuart puts his website as well in the chat. You can reach us through Moyo Gems, Onza Gems, 1948. That's how you can connect with the finished gems that have been processed so far. But we're really excited about actually looking at ways that we can help the women, again, with the beading, tumbling, cabochon, like eventually moving them into faceting. The more that they can process there, frankly, the better it is. Like I don't need to be the middle person. Like this just happens to be the way that things work because that's how the system works now, right? But the more that we can empower Tuoloma to actually own their destiny is really important as well. And the way that we can do that is to greenlight, like, you like our gems, you're buying our gems. So yeah, shameless self-promotion there. So, but
it's the name of the game, right? So the Moyo Gems, the 1948 and the Onza Gems links are all in the chat. So I hope people find those helpful and find what they're looking for there. We had another question come in. Someone said, Great work, everyone. I have a question about your philosophy that all the profits go direct to the miner. What will happen to the people whom the gems usually pass through before getting to the usual gem dealer? Will their jobs be eliminated eventually?
Yeah, maybe I can start that and then Monica can jump in. That's a great question. When we were introducing the project locally in Tanzania, that was one of the first questions we got from the brokers. It was like, what about us? Thanks, we want to be a part of this. Are you going to cut us out? And at first, we kind of looked at each other and we're kind of wondering how we're going to do this. And then we realized actually Tanzanian law requires us to work with local brokers. So what we did was we asked the original 54 ladies and a few gents to nominate 6 local brokers that they found trustworthy from the community and who wanted to work with. And they had good and bad experiences with brokers. And brokers, let's be clear, serve a really important role. In some parts of the world, they offer pre-financing. So they provide rice and money in the hard times. And let's be very clear. I don't want to villainize anyone. But in this part of Tanzania, they were mainly aggregators. So what we did was we worked with them to get them all on one license. The Tanzanian government worked with us on that. So they're licensed as well. And they love being part of Market Day because they make in a few days what they would take months to make. So they're very happy. Now, what we're doing is a tiny part of a bigger region that's kind of slushing around with gems. And so we are being as inclusive as possible because we don't want to make anybody be put in harm's way. That's why we've also opened it up to men too. So we have 60% women, 40% men. So no one is isolated or up for sabotage, but it's still very much a women's focused program. And all those men are part of Tuwoma. And we make it very clear to the men, this is a women's program. They are letting you be a part of this program. And the women love that. And I always get laughs for that line, but it's true. And some of the ladies that we work with have told us that they feel comfortable being part of the program because it is for women. It's not a man's program, it's a women's program. So back to your question, so we are building in local brokers into the model. But if you kind of step back and look at overall sourcing trends, the supply chains everywhere are shrinking. So they're shortening naturally. However you decide to source, there's always a way to do better. And there's always a way to work with trusted folks that are adding value. You can, that's part of innovation. So I don't want to say this is the only model you have to do. There's a really cool model in Zambia that was created based on their strengths. And then there's other folks who've been doing this for a very long time as small family businesses and are communicating more about it. Monica, anything to add? You're on mute.
Sorry, I was going to Virtue Gems is the program that's operating in Zambia. I think Susan Wheeler might actually be on this webinar, so feel free to drop that in the chat as well for people to have exposure to yet another wonderful program that is, working to really change the system, right? Like that's. And with change, it's kind of hard work. It's kind of one foot in front of the other. And it also involves changing some of these dynamics and these structures that are in place. We worked really hard though to take that into consideration with the structure of the program, building those brokers in, making sure that there was community support there. The last thing we need is, the last thing we want is any kind of unintended consequences for the women to participate in the markets, and really just try to support the entire community. Where this is not just about grabbing a gem grab, right? Like this is about kind of building the community. And let's face it, women are good stewards of those resources, which is why we focused on women primarily, but we want to make sure that the entire community is kind of taken into account as well. So I think Christina really kind of covered it, but just making sure we were very intentional about how we set this up. And to Christina's point, I do think that there are parts of the system that maybe are a little bit extraneous. Maybe it doesn't need to change hands 10 times before it just leaves Tanzania, let alone go to Tucson, let alone get flipped, 3 times in Tucson. These shorter supply chains create transparency. And so that's ultimately a good thing. I think that good brokers, like the ones that are involved in the system, who got heads, like a nod from the women themselves, they're really successful with this. So I think the brokers who can adapt and understand that things might be changing a little bit and to truly add value in their role, brokers aren't going anywhere. The good brokers are really an important part of the ecosystem. So it's really just a question of who's adding value and how do we get more value into the hands of the people who are digging like this really, really hard artisanal work. How do we get them to be compensated fairly?
Okay, thank you so much. I also just dropped into the, Susan Wheeler just dropped the Virtue Gem URL into the chat, and I dropped a story Brecken did on Virtue Gem last year into the chat as well. And this is biased, obviously, but if anyone doesn't follow Brecken on LinkedIn or on Twitter or on Instagram, she does a lot of great work and great writing about sourcing and colored gemstone sourcing. So she is also a great resource for information. And I just wanted to add that, although I know I'm biased as her boss, but we had another question come in, and this listener said, "Thank you for hosting this webinar. Moyo Gems is a beautiful initiative. In terms of data collection, particularly qualitative interviews, what have you found in terms of changes in community dynamics as a result of female miner empowerment? How has this affected the miners' personal lives? And have there been some negative effects?" And the video got into this a little bit, but Christina, Norbert, Monica, I don't know who wants to take that, but I thought that was a pretty interesting question.
I would say Norbert actually had the opportunity. So we didn't talk a lot about COVID effects, but obviously COVID really, really has been detrimental, right? Like all of our travel plans, all of the plans for markets, all of those things had to be sort of postponed or redirected. And so we managed to pull off like 2 remote market days, the end of 2020 and in February of 2021. And that is in no small part to Norbert and to Woma's incredible work, the entire PAC Tanzania team. We could not do this. We could not do what we did in late 2020, 21 without incredible local partners who've been incredibly supportive and helpful in pulling this off. So Norbert actually had a chance to interview a couple of women, like casually, like maybe on video, or just interview them about kind of effects. So maybe Norbert could share at least one story. I know Bahati was able to kind of talk to you. I don't know if there's anybody else that you could share.
Yeah, sure. From the market day that happened, we call them virtual market days by Monica and Stuart not participating, but of course we were there physically. So you can really hear a lot of good words from women. We can see that their confidence has really increased due to these markets that have been happening. First of all, because these markets are women-centered, so even when they talk to the other people, they are really confident that these are their markets. So they are able to sell, they're able to store their stones to wait for these markets. So their confidence levels has increased, even at the household level. In the past, women could not say anything because they cannot earn. Even when they have stones, they will give them to their husbands to go and sell, and sometimes they don't get money back. So with these markets now, since they are getting money, so they can go back home with food, they can take their kids to school. So you can even hear, I heard one Maasai woman saying that, you know what, these markets have really changed our lives. I want my kids to go and learn more about the stones, because before that we didn't know what was the value of these stones, but now we are knowing them more, and I want my kids to go and learn more about the stones so that we can get more benefits out of these stones. They're really kind of these short stories from women, and once you hear, you can really say that there's a lot of positivity that has been changed due to these markets.
Thank you so much, Norbert.
Yeah.
And our data collection will be ongoing. So tomorrow, actually, Norbert hits the road to 2 different locations that the Tiffany and Company Foundation is supporting program rollout. We'll be collecting metrics both in the Moyo sites, but also in non-Moyo sites, and we want to have some interesting, comparative data. So watch that space. If you don't follow me on LinkedIn, just find my name and follow, because I'll be posting over time some of the learnings and data that we'll be collecting.
Okay. Norbert, Monica, Christina, thank you all so much for joining us today. It was such an interesting discussion, and I can tell our audience loved it as well. And Brecken, thank you so much for hosting. These are all the questions we have time for today. But my next question will return next Wednesday. That's April 28th. And then we're going to be on at 10 a.m. Eastern. Our senior editor, Ashley Davis, is going to be in conversation with Elle Hill, the founder and CEO of Hill & Co., about launching and growing a jewelry business. As a reminder, all our webinars are recorded and available on the National Jeweler website. I just dropped that link to the chat. This webinar, as I mentioned, will be up on Friday, and you can see any of our other webinars up there as well. Thank you all again for joining us today, and please take care.